Nothing happening here but good music. You're tuned to 90.7 FM. We're WNCU Durham. And support for WNCU comes from WNCU members and the NC Opera as they present Candice Hoy's In on a Turquoise Cloud cabaret style. That'll be January 27th and 28th at the Contemporary Art Museum in Raleigh. Start time is 8 p.m. And Candice, she's in studio with us. And first we're going to start out with some of her music, and then we'll talk to her about her performance and how she likes this North Carolina weather. Good music on your radio. And that's music from a new release. Matter of fact, it's the debut release from Candice Hoy's On a Turquoise Cloud, music composed by the great Duke Ellington. And welcome to Durham, North Carolina, and you're going to be performing in Raleigh, and I hear you that you've been wanting to come here for a while.
That is true. Hello. How are you, Austin?
I'm well, thank you. Welcome to Durham, and we're going to make sure that you get to tour our jazz studies department, because we produce great jazz musicians, and the Triangle has wonderful performers, and we're happy that you're here and going to be performing on January 27th and 28th at the CAM over in Raleigh, the Contemporary Art Museum. Showtime is 8 p.m., and I think that we're going to even be giving away tickets. Tell us about the music. I know that you were trained. You started out playing piano at 6. You trained in opera. Why jazz?
Well, the very first thing you said of me is totally true. I have been dreaming of coming to Raleigh, Durham since 2015, which is the same time when this album first was released. And why jazz? I'd say I grew up very family oriented. My family is actually from Jamaica, and one of the most normalizing things for our family was jazz. And so my grandparents immigrated to Queens, and on the one hand, my grandfather was a huge jazz head, and I listened every weekend, kind of secondhand. I would sit in the hallway of their apartment when he would turn the lights out in the living room and have his cocktail and sit in his chair and listen to his records. And I would sit just a few feet away, because he wasn't really looking to entertain children when he was listening to Miles Davis, and I would just listen. And at the same time, I was studying classical piano, and I was singing in church and school, and eventually I realized I had this soprano voice, really kind of easy and natural to me. But I had all these influences, and jazz is something that can embrace the individual, and that was my world. That was my walk. I had a wonderful start, and I'm not classically trained. I like to share with people I'm classically experienced. I've performed operas all around the country and all around the world. I'm an opera singer. I'm also a jazz singer, and I think a big part of my identity is that I'm a multiplicity of things, and jazz embraces that kind of freedom.
Yeah, and wow, young, and you've sung already with some great folks. I mean, you have a relationship with Wynton Marsalis and Jazz at Lincoln Center. Tell us about that.
Yes, that was a real watershed moment for me as an artist. So I had won opera competitions, and I was performing roles in New York, and Wynton Marsalis wrote this very large-scale work called the Abyssinian Mass, and so they were assembling to take it on tour in anticipation of recording it, and that was a huge opportunity. I kind of went in with in a naive way. I just sang my audition and was excited, but I think I had a reputation as an artist in the city who was really curious and sang different styles, and that meant a lot to that project. That was the type of person they were looking for, and so I got my first opportunity to sing with Wynton, and I actually went on tour with the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra, realizing his work for a month. So we went all over the country, and I was always the type of singer that I didn't necessarily like to hang with the singers. I would go hang out with the band and go to the after session in Kansas City or New Orleans. When we hit New Orleans, I was out the whole night. I went from club to club with them, and they would sit in and and sit back, and we ate, and I have just the most wonderful memories of that time. But that was also a very creative, artistic time for me. I didn't quite realize it was 2013, so I didn't have the album in its full form, in its codified form that it is now. But that was when the creative seed started in me. And not long, about 2014, after we came off the road, I even got to the Los Angeles Review of Books had been following my operatic work and asked me to write about this tour, and I got to interview Wynton also and write a 2-part essay on my experience. So,
was he recording those as he was on tour?
Well, that's a wonderful question. So my actual first recording is with Wynton on the Abyssinian Mass, which was released in 2015 as well. So we recorded, it was a live recording, and it's on the record label for Jazz at Lincoln Center. So yes, there's that album too.
But this CD is your debut CD.
That's mine.
Yeah.
That's
Tell us about
baby.
the tune, the title tune that we just heard. Tell us about that.
Oh yes. So On a Turquoise Cloud. Concluding that tour experience, I started listening to a lot of things to figure out what my own project would be, what was my statement. And I started listening to a lot of Ellington, because he's just a kind of a musical father for me. I always go to Ellington. And I found these songs. The first was Creole Love Call, and I noticed this is radical. This is definitely scat singing from Adelaide Hall, who was the person who recorded it in 1927 with Ellington, but it's into these soprano tones, and it sounds highly classical. So I went digging and looking for lead sheets to see if I could try it out with a band, to try out some of these tunes, and I couldn't find any lead sheets. And I looked everywhere. In New York, we have Juilliard, we have all these wonderful catalogs of Ellington, and they weren't around. They weren't accessible for a vocalist to find, and I realized that's because there were like the quarters that fell between the couch cushions. There was no one using them, and they were pretty much obscure. So I talked to a colleague, friend of mine, Ulysses Owens Jr., who is a fabulous jazz drummer, and he's a producer, and I was like, man, I've been looking for these tunes. I really want to explore them. I think that could be my project. And he said, well, you find them, and that could be your album.
Yeah.
So I went to the Smithsonian by myself, starting in the summer of 2014, and I started going through the archives slowly and excitedly, and I wore the white gloves, and I went through bins of penciled Duke Ellington manuscripts by myself. It was almost a spiritual, religious experience, just because it's just beautiful to hold Black history in your fingers like that. And you know, there's so much of our culture that is not so beautifully preserved, and it's just so, and you know, even before thinking about that awesome Smithsonian Museum that exists now, it's so awesome that we can walk in and, well, I had to apply, and I learned a lot about that, so it was highly educational, but you know, to apply to do that research. But once I was there, it was just a real self-discovery, and I found the songs, one of them being On a Turquoise Cloud. And the reason On a Turquoise Cloud exists, and the reason these particular rare songs exist, is because Ellington, with the breadth of his musical genius, could see, and any Black person in the day could see, the society divided, not just by race, but the implications it had for a musician who was gifted enough in the classical realm and in others, that people who were being excluded from excelling in classical music because of race. And he encountered a great talent in the 40s named Kay Davis, who was one of 8 students, Black students at Northwestern University studying music. And Miss Davis went on to actually get a master's in music. If people think that would be discouraging, to be one of 8 in the undergrad music program, and you know, Central has such a fabulous, world-renowned music program. All you students listening, you can imagine, put yourself in the shoes if you were one of 8. And Miss Davis, I went through not just the manuscripts of Ellington, but a lot of oral histories, And Miss Davis talks about how it felt. She was one of the most exceptional vocalists in her class, and she was living in segregated housing. How much she talks about how she said she used to drool over the housing that the white music students had. And that said, she was chosen to be featured in the senior recital for the opera program. And Duke Ellington had heard that she was going to be in her doing her recital, and someone said, this singer is so phenomenal. You never heard a woman like this before. You got to go check it out." And he actually showed up at Northwestern and hired her on the spot for the Ellington band.
And you're phenomenal too. We want to share some more music with our listeners. You've picked out some tunes, and next up we're going to play Creole Love Call. And we'll come back with more interview with Candice Hoyce. She'll be performing January 27th and 28th at the Contemporary Art Museum over in Raleigh. The showtime is 8 p.m. This is Creole Love Call. We're WNCU Durham. Yes, now here at 90.7 FM WNCU. We proudly present and preserve America's treasure here on the beautiful campus of North Carolina Central University. We have Candice Hoyce in studio with us. Two selections from her tune, or her CD, On a Turquoise Cloud. You just heard Single Petal of a Rose, and before that, Creole Love Call. Tell us about the music, Candice.
Well, those are very special selections for me. Both of those songs I wrote the lyrics for, and Creole Love Call is really tied to history for me, Ellington history, jazz history. Those singers that singer that I was speaking of, Kay Davis, she and Adelaide Hall, who first recorded it, Creole Love Call, were the only ones that Duke Ellington ever asked to record that. He was extremely particular in his vision, and his vision was really of music beyond category, and that's a big inspiration for me. And he really put his money where his mouth was by writing these songs. As you can hear, they have a lot of classicism to them, and for a soprano like me, who's steeped in both, and for Kay Davis back in the 40s, it means a great opportunity, right? But the other thing is, when I found the songs, I was like struck by how it felt like how little had changed about the rigidity of how people categorize us as artists of color. And so I just wanted to live in this freedom. And so interpreting these songs with my own contemporary band after over 70 years, it's been over 70 years since some of these Duke Ellington songs have even been taken up and recorded professionally. So we really dug into it, and that's what that song just reminds me of. It's just such a rich history and such a privilege. And then the second song, I just have to pay my respects to a friend I love dearly, who has made his transition, Mr. Joe Temperley, who, God rest his soul, was really internationally acclaimed for his interpretation of Single Petal of a Rose. And my album is produced by Ulysses Owens Jr., who is an awesome drummer and a friend of mine and a great creative collaborator of mine. And we just wanted to go out on a limb and see if we could take a piece that is really for horns and has never been, that we know of, recorded with a vocalist, and turn it into something. And because of the range of my voice, I'm able to do that. And it was really fun, and certainly having Mr. Temperley's generous, participation in the music made me feel even more confident. So I just say, my inspiration in all of this is really not only integrating the history and where I come from, but writing my own words for both of those songs is so much a point of why I make music. It's because as an artist, we have to speak about our own times. As a young person, the best way to advocate is through your actions. And so that's the way that I see music making.
Yes.
And to take it into a community like maybe the operatic community or the established jazz community, and to really do your best to expand it and include more people, make it more inclusive, and to just build the community up through your music, and to touch people that way. I think that's why I make music.
Candice, you're going to be performing January 27th and 28th at the CAM. So tell us about what are you going to be doing? Are you going to be performing music from this album? What can the listeners expect?
Yes, I am going to be performing music from On a Turquoise Cloud, and part of my dream was to come to Raleigh, Durham, and actually my band, although I'm from Florida, my band is a Durham born and Central bred
Wonderful
jazz artists. So it's really great, because I told my colleagues that I'm really about community building. So I just want to invite everybody at Central and everyone in the WNCU listening audience to come out and join us and be a part of these 2 nights. And I want to say, it's just a joy to be presented by North Carolina Opera. And for the listeners, for WNCU, North Carolina Opera is really exceptional in the classical world, because it's one of the most innovative companies in America as far as the range and the sophistication of the productions they're taking on, which you mostly see in places like New York or Berlin or London. But North Carolina Opera is really kind of on the cutting edge if you know about classical music. So to combine that with the jazz community that's so vibrant in North Carolina, it seemed like a perfect marriage. So everyone come out. We're going to be playing at Contemporary Art Museum in Raleigh at 8 p.m. on Friday, January 27th, which is tomorrow, and
Candice,
Saturday the 28th.
We do have some free tickets we'll be giving away after the top of the hour, after the news, sometime during DL's show. Closing out with one more selection from her CD, On a Turquoise Cloud. This is Baby, and you wrote the lyrics, right?
No, not this one.
Not this
but
one?
I do love this one.
Yeah.
Thanks, Asim.
Thank you so much for being here. And folks, stay tuned, because we're going to be giving away free pairs of tickets. We're WNCU Durham.